Okay, so this lesson is on the elementary math lesson, and it was the fourth grader
Yes.
that you watched.
Some of the really positive things that I saw in the lesson were your use of vocabulary, that the students were familiar with the terms. It wasn't something new to them, and you consistently used algorithm. So it was not something that when they saw that on the test, and we all know it's going to be there, that they're not going to be, it's going to be a big word, but they've heard it, they've used it, it's everyday language to them. I'm not really good at using those technical terms. So good job on that you're consistent with it. They know it. They're familiar with it. I thought the lesson went really well. You could tell that the students knew their content, that you knew what their next lesson should be. They were ready for it. We talked about earlier, as I was watching the lesson, I missed the kid asking for a sheet of paper. We talked about how we're not seeing kids write things down as often to check themselves. And why do you feel that some of them rely on it and some of them don't? Are you seeing some consistency one way or the other?
Well, I mean, the students that I'm seeing in my classroom are usually not always, but it's usually the girls that are doing that. They're always wanting to have that paper beside them and to write it down. But I've also encouraged them to do that too.
Sure.
I have a few boys that will do it, but there are some boys that I have to remind, or I have to model for them on how to do it. Let's write this down and let's see how to do this, and then I'll let them do some of it on their own while I'm walking around or whatever, and I'll walk away and they'll say, "Oh, I don't know how to do this," and I'll say, "Well, did you write it down?" And they'll say, "No, I didn't write it down yet." So they have to write it down and then see if they can do it. So.
Do you think that's because we talked about when you guys were watching the strategy, that the strategy took so much longer to do that they weren't impressed with the new strategy?
Yeah, I mean, even one boy said, "This is boring."
Right.
So.
And we talked about, we think that's because it's just harder. Anything that's harder, they're done. I want the easiest way out. And I think that's the way society has even gone, that's the expectation. The easiest, the shortest, the quickest, get me out of here the fastest, I'm done.
Right.
So, and that's probably a lot of what you're seeing in which strategies they're choosing. I like that you're giving them multiple strategies, that even though you know that one and it works for you, hey, here's another way somebody else did it. Let's try it that way. And that gives them a way to go back and self-check later on. Even we talked about, I don't know that a lot of kids are doing that they can self-check. No, you check it. You tell me if it's right or wrong.
Right.
Because that's easiest.
Right.
But we know later they're going to have to self-check themselves and their work before they can turn it in. So I really liked those things. I liked the vocabulary even of the exit ticket. None of it was new for them. You can tell that's what you guys do in your class every time. They already knew when you said we're going to have an exit ticket at the end. They weren't alarmed. They weren't, okay, we know what's coming. I like that you had your objective posted. You went over it with them. This is what we're going to do. And then, why do you think we're doing this? Why in the world would we do this?
Right. Well, with math, we always want to try to do it where they see that it's everyday, life. It's not just because we're at school we're having to do this because you tell me to do it. There's a reason all behind it, and I'm constantly telling my kids that that we are doing this. And there was a question that I don't know if it's in this lesson or another lesson that I did. But I said, "Why do you think that we do this?" And they said, "Well, probably because on our job we're going to have to do it." So,
I heard some of them talking about that.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to do it because it's our lesson. But at work, we're going to have to, and to go to McDonald's and
Right. But one of the reasons why that I am, even though they had a really good handle on the algorithm, and the algorithm is like the highest level. You know, it's very complex.
Right.
And so, but I want them to, like the place value strategy, I want them to see why that place value is changing, you know, why we're having to put some of those tens into hundreds and hundreds into thousands, you know.
Well, and why we're even carrying.
Right.
Because when you're carrying, it's just, I'm just moving the first number up there.
Right.
I noticed in your lesson that you consistently put the larger number on bottom. And I even asked, was that with purpose? Did you intentionally do that? Because you had already talked about when you got to subtraction, it's a whole different ballgame. Things switch around and you're doing it backwards. Even, you know, with that number on the bottom, it's all gonna be backwards for them. So I wondered if that was intentional to make subtraction look different.
Yeah, I didn't make it intentional, but maybe it's just because I've just
done it long enough that you can see that's easier for them because it's gonna switch up soon. Yeah.
But like I was saying too, that at the beginning of the school year, we did a lot of those different strategies. You know, of me flipping those numbers and you know, it's easier. You go more of a distance if you you know, go for the big number first and then do your adding on.
Yeah.
So
you're not adding as much, it seems like, to me.
Doing a little bit of less work.
Exactly. And they want the easy way out. That's it. That's the point. One of the things that I liked was when she asked, or she was talking through her problem, and she said, this is the number and that's the number, but 9's bigger. It's on the bottom, but that's the one I'm picking because it's bigger. So she knew, she already knew, and you can tell y'all had laid that groundwork that she knew where to start the easiest.
And this will also carry into multiplication.
Right.
You know, when you have 5 or 8 times 5, you know, they can do that. They can do it to the smaller number because they can count by 5s easier.
Exactly.
You know? So it's trying to help them to be flexible with those numbers.
Sure. And you can see that they know their number facts because they could put numbers together, even if they couldn't tell you that's what they were doing. And I saw her struggle with being able to tell you understood it, but she was struggling there a little bit to say, well, there is a 3 in that. You understood what she meant and just let her go on.
Right.
But yeah, she knew, she just wasn't sure how to say it. But you could tell she understood it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a struggle a lot of times for our kids, especially with communication. And she's one of the ones that struggles with being able to communicate and how to say things like she means them. So that's neat.
Well, that's
to
her.
see.
That's her disability. It's the language impairment. So, it's really hard for her to express things, you know, into a clear, concise statement. So, yeah.
But it was neat to see her thinking aloud and going, "This is why I'm doing this." Yeah, that was really neat. The vocabulary, and I told you earlier, I think they were ready for 6 digit. I'd have thrown it off in there and said, okay, here we go.
And I did think about doing that. But
and probably if it hadn't been a formal planned lesson, you know, on a day-to-day, well, let's see if they're ready for this. Throw it in there. But you had your time accounted for, and I know your time with them is limited. Yeah. Do you feel like y'all get through everything you have planned in the time you have them?
No.
Never.
Never. No. It's, you know, it's difficult to get, because of course every lesson not going to go perfectly.
No.
You know.
No.
You know, like this one was like they grabbed it or they grasped it so well, but then there's not always that happens. Sometimes the lesson, they do not understand it.
And you've got to go way back ahead of that and go back to, remember when we did this?
Right.
Yeah. But this one was spot on. They were ready for it. They knew the terminology. They knew the underlying stuff they had to get to be able to move forward with it. I thought it went really well. Make sure I covered everything on there. like that your stuff was posted for them, that you guys went over that. You told them what your expectations were, what they were going to be doing. So do they do an exit ticket every day? Is that really your just daily assessment of?
Not every day, because sometimes they may not be ready for it, you know.
Or you're continuing a lesson the next day.
I may be having to do a little bit more practice.
Sure.
You know. But yeah, it's just a way to kind of evaluate to see, you know, what they understood and what I need to address for the next lesson.
Sure.
You know.
Absolutely. I think it went great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Look, we're at 10 minutes, Rhonda. 11 minutes.